This is Lee Habib, and this is Our American Stories. And we got a good hour for you. We're going to be talking about some food fights in Chicago. We're going to talk about hipsters. And we're going to talk about one mom's fight with a community college in Chicago. Chicago is the center of things, and that brings us to our first segment.
This is my kind of town. Chicago is my kind of town. Chicago.
Actually, every time I hear Sinatra, I want a martini, a cigarette, and I want to wear a good hat and a great suit.
Absolutely.
And that's the opposite of hipster life. Sinatra is actually the opposite, the antithesis of hipster life. Wouldn't that be a great combination? Get a hipster and Frank Sinatra, put them in a movie together. Have them bunk up. So that was Frank Sinatra with that hit song of his, My Kind of Town, written about one of his favorite cities, Chicago, Illinois. And it is a great place to eat, great Italian food. Drinking town with a football problem, as I like to say. They say it about Buffalo, but I like to say it about Chicago. But would Sinatra write My Kind of Town about Chicago today? Yesterday we heard about where opportunity is in America, and we're going to be covering a lot about this great country and where people are moving to and from, what's going on in people's careers and their businesses. Not enough is spoken about that. It's always big politics in Washington, but the actions in the states and the communities and cities, the American people, we're going to love to talk about here on Our American Stories. We will not be talking to politicians or about them. Who cares? So this segment is about where opportunity isn't in America, and that is the city of Chicago, a city that doesn't want its people to find opportunity, a city that's causing many of its people to leave. In this segment, we'll tell you the stories and bring you the stories of real human lives impacted by, well, some really stupid rules. Our field correspondent, Alex Cortez, brings you this report.
One of the city's victims is named Claudia. Her story is brought to us by the Illinois Policy Institute.
Me arrestaron 2 veces. Pues si Estados Unidos me dijeron que era otra cosa. Y ahora... ¿Cómo nos están tratando, no?
Claudia was recounting how the Chicago police arrested her twice. She said, quote, "The United States, they told me, is a different kind of place. And now, look how we're being treated." What would make Claudia say something so dramatic, so devastating, and from a Mexican immigrant of all people? Immigrants who tend to be impassioned about America. Here's Beth Kragor, attorney at the public interest law firm Institute for Justice, on why it's not what you'd expect.
Unlike almost every major city in the country, unlike most major cities, cosmopolitan places in the world, Chicago bans simple street food. That means that vendors who are already out there selling traditional foods like tamales or sliced fruit or other kinds of snacks, they're all working in the shadow of the law, and they can be and are regularly stopped by inspectors or police officers.
Stopped, arrested, and even fined $2,000. 20 times more than the fine for parking in front of a fire hydrant. Which causes the greater public hazard? Claudia is one of those street food vendors, serving tamales, rice pudding, and hot chocolate. Every day she wakes up at 2:30 a.m., and every day she works until 10 p.m. Absolutely no leisure time for herself and only 4.5 hours of sleep every single day. She loves serving her food that customers love, but she doesn't love walking into legal danger every time she pulls her cart into the dark of the early morning.
Llegó el día que dijo el policía, tiren esa porquería. Eso no sirve, es basura. Y yo dije, ¿cómo le va a decir basura a la comida? Yo lloraba mucho.
Claudia said, the day arrived when a policeman told me, throw all this trash away. It's worthless. It's garbage. And I say, how can you call food garbage? I cried hard. A good tamale is like a treasure that's worth the quest. It's never garbage. And an honest day's work is never garbage either. For a city rampant with violence, a city that, after all the attention brought to its violence, has seen a 21% increase in homicides over the last year. Should this, where its police officers, be focusing on street vendors serving tamales? Claudia is likely crying today too. This time, though, tears of joy. Thanks to the street vendors who fought for their freedom to flourish, and to groups like the Illinois Policy Institute and the Institute for Justice, who raised awareness and filed lawsuits on their behalf, the City Council of Chicago just overturned the ban on street vending. It was too late for some Chicago street vendors, though, including coffee and tea vendor Sarah Travis, who had to abandon the hometown that she loves.
You're Abe Froman.
That's right. I'm Abe Froman.
The Sausage King of Chicago.
They're not gonna catch us. We're on a mission from God.
Illinois Nazis. I hate Illinois Nazis.
And I honestly had no intentions of moving. I was very much set on we can make it work here, and we're going to work really hard all winter. And we set a couple deadlines, and those deadlines came and went. And it became more clear to us that we can always come home to Chicago, and that's something that we definitely want to pursue, but Texas is ready for us.
Moves aren't fun. It's a big decision to move your family, and an even greater risk to move your business. But in Chicago, it may be a greater risk to keep your business there. Something Chicagoans who deeply love their city wish weren't so. Sarah was surprised what happened the very week she registered her business in Austin, Texas, which took all of 15 minutes.
The mayor of my city is in this new city that I'm going to be in, and he's telling everyone how great Chicago is and how we all need to move to Chicago and bring all the jobs and all the, welcoming entrepreneurship. And I'm sitting there going, wow, I'm right here. I'm in this city where you are now because you're making me be there, because I can't physically stay where I want to stay.
As I throw each one of you.
This is Lee Habib. When we come back, we'll be joined by Hillary Gowans, the managing editor at the Illinois Policy Institute. Great report, Alex.
My kind of town, Chicago is.
Like campfires? How about a campfire atmosphere with friends and brought to your ears wherever you are? That's what we do at Our American Stories. A show that tells great American stories of love, final thoughts before dying, funny stories about first jobs, this day in history, American dreams and marriages, and so much more. And then here's your stories on these big topics live every weeknight. Or listen online at ouramericannetwork.org. We'll hope you join the campfire and call in with your stories.
Are you tired of all the talk about politics? How about talking about paychecks? Because that's what the Job Creators Network does. It's the voice of real job creators that's been missing. Led by Home Depot founder Bernie Marcus, over 50 job creators across the country are members.
Home Depot, if we started it today, we could never have succeeded with today's regulations.
Your voice is needed. If you're a job creator and interested in learning more, visit jobcreatorsnetwork.com.
My name is Judy Teeter, and I'm the mother of 3 boys. My youngest, Joe, was a great kid. He loved sports, music, and his youth group. One day, Joe asked me to drive him to an after-school event, which was about a mile from our home. I was driving through a green light when a car in cross traffic ran a red light and drove right into the side of our car, killing Joe. The driver was talking on her phone, so she never even saw the red light. She was so absorbed in her phone call. Before the crash, I didn't realize just talking on a cell phone while driving was so dangerous. Now it's something I think about every day. According to the National Safety Council, about 1 in 4 car crashes involves a cell phone. Hands-free is no safer. When you're behind the wheel, put away your phone. For Joe and for the thousands of needless deaths every year. Remember, there is no safe way to talk on a cell phone while driving. Find out more at nsc.org/callskill.
Hi, it's Practical Polly's radio show. If you're just figuring out that healthier cooking oils are better than solid fats, you may be asking, now what am I going to do with all these tubs of lard? Ever had one of those moments when your favorite skinny jeans feel too tightly tailored? Generously apply lard to your hips and thighs and those fancy pants will slide on like a dream. Or Or here's a family-friendly idea. How about making your yard into a large fun park? Frost your driveway with a nice thick coating and give those kiddos a downhill thrill no matter what time of year. Having a bad hair day? Yep. A little lump of lard can tame your flyaways in a jiffy. So there's no need for that lard to go to waste or to your waste. But get your best heart-healthy trade-up with healthier oils like canola, olive, or other vegetable oils, which can actually lower your chances for heart disease. Now that's a tip worth keeping for life. Learn more at heart.org/facethefats. Canola Info is the national supporter of the American Heart Association's Face the Fats campaign.
John Nichols was making major strides in his career when at age 32, a water skiing accident left him critically injured. Fortunately, he had disability insurance.
For me, disability insurance was the safety net. I did not have to worry about the bills. I did not have the financial concerns.
Thanks to disability insurance that John had through work and on his own, he continued to receive an income until he could return to work. Learn more at protectyourpaycheck.org, a message from the nonprofit Life Foundation.
This is David Cordani, CEO of Cigna. For more than 20 years, Cigna has worked with the March of Dimes to address premature births in the U.S. Thank you for taking time to learn more about how you could support March for Babies in 2015. Premature births cause horrible suffering and cost billions of dollars each year. That's why Cigna is committed to raising funds and awareness through our employees, family, and friends to improve the health of moms and babies. Please join us in supporting the March for Babies. Start your team today at marchforbabies.org.
To 6 and 2 is 8. Come on, baby, don't you make me late. Baby, don't you wanna go back to that same old place, sweet home Chicago.
This is Lee Habib. You're listening to Our American Stories. Coming up in a bit, hipster moments. We'll have Jesse's World. Right now, you're listening to the great Robert Johnson song, and we're in Oxford, Mississippi right here, not far from that crossroad where Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil, not far away from Memphis either. We're here in Oxford, Mississippi. And last segment, we talked about how Chicago isn't so sweet to its own people trying to pursue their dreams, and told the stories of street vendors named Claudia and Sarah, whose businesses were rendered illegal because Chicago banned street food vendors, one of the only major cities in the world to do so. And thankfully, the ban was recently overturned. With us for this segment is one of the players involved in that victory. And we love to talk about victories here. What's happening in the states. Again, Washington, D.C., we don't care. Let everybody else in talk radio talk about, those androids in Washington. We're here to talk about the people of the United States and what's happening in regions across this state. And joined by us now, Hillary Gowans. Thanks for coming on with our show.
Thanks for having me on, Lee.
Tell us this. Why, we just listened to that story. And again, thanks for the great work you're doing over there at the Illinois Policy Institute. This is important stuff. Why was there ever a ban on street food vendors in the first place? What was going on there?
Well, first of all, I just want to say it was great to hear some familiar voices in your segment just before I came on. I heard the voice of Sarah Travis. I heard the voice of Claudia Perez. And those two women know just how hard it was to fight for food cart freedom. There really was no good reason for food carts to be banned in Chicago. Food carts are a beloved part of a lot of communities across the city, particularly in low-income Hispanic communities, like where Claudia's from. Little Village is on the southwest side of the city, and every morning before dawn, Claudia is up serving delicious tamales and elotes to factory workers on their way to the job. A lot of what you see in Chicago with silly rules like this has to do with the fact that the city likes to protect established players, whether that's restaurants, whether that's taxis, or other kinds of businesses.
So it's big versus small in the end, and it's about how bigger organizations and companies try and block out small ones, and in essence, it sounds like, Hillary, blocking out the competition.
Right, and that's what we've seen. It's a hard fight for little guys like Claudia and Sarah to get the freedom they deserve. We're really grateful that City Council passed an ordinance that overturned the city's ban on food carts. That was a great victory, and while you want to jump up and down about that, we couldn't celebrate for too long because less than a day after the city overturns their ban on food carts, 2 aldermen decided to introduce an ordinance that would essentially limit where food carts could operate in 2 wards. One in the popular River North area, which is home to a lot of Chicago's finest restaurants, and one area just outside of just surrounding Wrigleyville. So while everyone is ecstatic that food carts are going to be able to operate in the city, we're all very concerned to see that aldermen are already acting against the best wishes of these vendors.
You know, what's interesting is that the whole country is very familiar with the ACLU and all the fights they fight for leftists. But, you know, the types of fights you're fighting are for just ordinary Americans. Forget politics. There's no ideology here. You're basically fighting you're not asking the political bona fides of the folks, how they vote, what they do. You're just fighting in the end, it sounds like, Hillary, for their freedom.
Yeah, and that's why this project is so near and dear to my heart. I don't like to pick sides. I don't like the left. I don't like the right. I want to fight for what's right. And I think that everyone, whether you're on the left side of the aisle or the right side of the aisle politically, can agree that it's not fair to prevent a mother from being able to work hard and serve delicious food to support her family. And we were so encouraged to see that we were joined by a coalition of people from both sides of the aisle. Now we just have to keep working hard and fighting to make sure that the city of Chicago doesn't continue to do what it's so good at doing, and that's protecting the establishment to the detriment of the little guy.
You know, 2 things I wanted to ask you, Hillary. They're separate questions. We'll take some separate answers. But the first is, where is the media on this? For the life of me, I don't understand why we aren't hearing more stories. I mean, who wouldn't be for the little guy here? I have so many friends who at certain points of their lives did the street vending thing. And my goodness, as a person who lived in New York, I had my absolute favorite food vendors all around the city, including my perfect hot dog right by the Hilton on Avenue of the Americas by a guy named Victor, who was there for like 13 years, and one day he disappeared, and it broke my heart. Why isn't the media covering this? And is your outreach to the media, because I'm sure you try, what happens with the big stations in Chicago and the big networks? Are people giving you the time of day?
Well, you know what's really sad is that when people aren't exposed to something like you were exposed to, you had your favorite vendor. Chicagoans were never exposed to street food culture, so they didn't know what they were missing. And our big fight was to introduce not only the media but the public to the faces of these people who are driving street food culture all around the city in the shadows, really. So our first step was to show people like Claudia, like Sarah, show who they are, show why what they're doing is important. And once we started to do that, the media really did perk up their ears. They started to listen. We were published in the Sun-Times and Crane Chicago Business. We were covered on this issue, and the street vendors were covered by every major media outlet in the city. So we were really encouraged to see that once people became familiar with the plight of these wonderful vendors, that support started to swell up from every corner imaginable.
Well, that's great news. Here is the other thing I don't understand, Hillary. So you're the restaurant. You're Mr. Fancy Pants Restaurant, Inc., and it's white cloth. Where is the lost volume sale? And that's an economic term, and what a lost volume sale means is the thinking is, well, if that person going at that street vendor eats a hot dog, that means he's not coming to my white cloth diner. Well, that makes no sense, Hillary. I mean, what are they really trying to protect? What are they afraid of?
I think people don't realize that it's not a zero-sum game when it comes to food options. The city has been protecting brick-and-mortar restaurants for a long time because these restaurants have so much clout. They're organized. They donate to politicians. And the truth of the matter was, when we were able to break through and get people to understand why the city needed to overturn the ban on food carts, the truth was that people realized that all that this would do would put food carts on a level playing field with restaurants. You know, people in the loop, if they're in a hurry, they want a quick lunch, they're not going to go sit down at a 5-star restaurant. They might, however, grab a hot dog from a food cart. But for every person like that, there's another group of people who are trying to have a business lunch. And I think that once people are going to get over their fear, they're going to realize that there's no threat. This is only going to enhance food culture in an already fantastic food city.
That's exactly right. I mean, there's just no lost sale here. It's a sort of a level of paranoia and a level of unfairness that just makes not only the good guys look good, but Hillary, it makes the bad guys look really bad. I want to put out an offer to you before we go to a break, and thanks so much for joining us. We want to track this, Hillary. We want to work with you and find these stories. If we could maybe do a weekly beat on this, big versus small, and fighting for the little guy, and reach out to you and the folks at the Institute for Justice, and maybe if you maybe ring that bell of yours and call up some of your friends at some of the other state policy institutes. Could you help me enlist in a fight for these kind of fights, the Uber fights, the big versus small, the big companies blocking out innovation and the little guy? How would you feel about that offer, Hillary?
Lee, I think that would be a great idea. I'm happy to come back and talk about these things. The Illinois Policy Institute for a little more than a year has been working on a campaign that we call No Cronies. You can visit nocronies.com to learn more about it. It follows the story of vendors like Claudia, of Uber drivers like Jim Evans, who's a retiree who was laid off and drives an UberX so he can support himself and his wife in his retirement. Stories of people who drive pedicab and are oppressed by the city. What we do is we track the stories of the little guy, the people who the city wants to trample, and that's a big part of our fight at the Illinois Policy Institute. In Illinois, we've got big problems. We're facing more than $100 billion in pension debt. We've got a city of Chicago that is staring down $1 billion budget deficit. But the reason that I love what we do so much is that we're actually taking the time to give a voice to people who are voiceless.
You bet. And you know what you're doing, Hillary? You're putting out some wins, W's in the column for freedom and economic freedom. I really appreciate you joining us, Hillary. Keep up the good fight, and let's try and make this a weekly hit. My folks here will call you tomorrow, and let's see if we can do this every week. Thanks so much for what you do, Hillary.
It's my pleasure. Nice talking to you, Lee.
You bet. This is Lee Habib. You're listening to Our American Stories. When we come back, hipsters. They're everywhere.
Thank you, land of California, for my sweet home, Chicago.